All right. So happy to be here with you guys on Saturdays at 1 p.m. when I read from my books. Okay. So I'm going to be reading from Guided today. This is my true life story, Guided. And as we move through this, as I finish the chapters in Guided, we're not there yet. We've got 28 chapters in Guided, and we're on chapter 20 today. We move through these. I'll be reading from the chapters of my other books that I have. I have 4 other books, a total of 5 books available on Amazon. You can see it right there on the corner, in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook format. So check them out, you guys. Okay, so we're going to be reading from chapter 20 today of Guided. And I just have to say, isn't that the most beautiful book cover that you ever laid eyes on? This right here, this is the photograph I took of my spirit guide angels when they showed up at Christmas time in 1994. And I happened to have a camera in my hand, a Nikon camera, when they appeared in the room, 7 feet tall, lit the whole room up. The kids were running around Christmas time. Everybody was there. And I snapped off their photograph because I'd seen them since I was a baby. And I looked at everybody in the room and said, "Did you guys see that?" And guess what they said? See what? Like all the times before when I saw things, experienced things that everyone else seems to miss, right? Okay, those days are changing, you guys. You're coming, you are now in a time where the vibration, the frequency, the permission is there where you can actually admit some of these things happen so that you're aware of them when they happen again. Okay, because it doesn't just happen once. It just lets you know I'm there. I'm there. Okay. So keep your awareness up, all right? This is going to be a fascinating chapter today. So I'm Linda Deir, and I will be reading to you from chapter 19 of my true life story, Guided. Her spirit guide angels were her best friends and life coaches. I read about the connection to my spirit guides shifts into high gear. In March of 1989, Steve and I went back to the Southwest to investigate a possible move. Our strategy was to get the talking board finished and ready for sale, complete with the instructions on how to use it. That way, we would have something with which to start our new life with. Of course, we were clueless about the marketing or how a project like this would even work out. Today, I will be reading to you from chapter 20 of Guided. Powerful forces amp up my energy. So sit back and relax as I tell the story of how, despite the dysfunction, my spirit guides took me on one journey after another that led me to a greater understanding of myself. All right, here we are in the book. See how far we've come along? All right there. Okay. Chapter 20, Powerful Forces Amp Up My Energy. Moving to a new state after living in California all my life was pretty strange. I was starting a new business when building and home design were all I had ever done, while dealing with a very different husband, one who had become moody and angry all the time. I was seeing what my guides meant in that first channeling session in December of 1988, when they told me to leave Steve behind. But for the time being, we were doing the best we could with a new life and a new business. Awareness. Your guides are always candid with you. They don't consider whether you can handle the truth or not. Of course you can. How you handle it is up to you. We were A big hit at the LA Expo, crowds of 30 people deep at our booth lined up to sample our new talking board and learn how to communicate with their guides. Most loved it, a few were skeptical, and a few others were afraid because of the negative association with the Ouija board. For demonstration purposes, I had made a transparency of the talking board image that fit on the overhead projector glass. This projected the talking board high up on the wall directly behind us on a 12-foot by 12-foot screen. The result was that no matter where you were inside the expo, you could see us in action. It was so exciting to watch, and exactly what my guides had shown me just 1 month earlier. I demonstrated the board's use with each person. I put my hand on the speller, otherwise called the planchette, and directed them to do the same thing. I told them to focus on breathing and let your guides come through. I talked to them about what was happening as the speller started moving around the board faster and faster. Then, as clear messages were being transmitted from their guides, I spoke them out loud. The people around us were also reading the messages out loud from the overhead screen, which drew even more attention to our booth. Each person received about 10 minutes of messages from their guides. I worked without a break for 3 to 4 hours at a time. I actually lost track of time. I didn't hear anyone around me or any other noises or announcements at the expo. It was just me, the person in front of me, and their first contact with their guides. It was good training for me as I experienced many interesting things in doing that. This was such an explosive demonstration that a Curlian photographer brought his equipment over to my booth and asked me to put my hand into the photography boot so he could take a photo of it. He did it right in front of everyone waiting for me in line with their turn on the talking board. He immediately displayed it, saying he had never seen so much energy in a photo before. The crowd went crazy with excitement. That just added more fuel to an already roaring blaze of interest. The talking board was a huge success. After the LA Expo, I booked shows for myself in Arizona and California, while Steve started his own computer repair business in Sedona and the Verde Valley. I applied the same successful presentation I had used at the LA Expo in other shows throughout 1990. More and more people got the experience of what it was like to try the talking board and make contact with their guides. From the exposure I had at these shows, I met many people who wanted training to advance their use of the talking board. As a result of those requests, I started classroom training lessons. They were filled up every time. From that, I chose several people from whom I could continue to train to be my channeling partners to perform channeled readings for clients and perform at the shows with me. That would turn out to be a real eye-opener for me. We had been in Arizona for just about 4 months when Steve's mom came out to visit. I was in the midst of a project teaching people to channel their guides on the talking board. She was very curious about what this was, so she asked me to take her along to the event that I had scheduled in Sedona for that night. I told her it was probably not a good idea and attempted to discourage her. But she insisted, So I told her to be ready for anything because anything could happen. I had a sense that she really didn't know what she was getting involved with. And sure enough, when it was her turn to receive messages, her deceased husband came through. He spoke to her, saying things only she would understand. She was shocked and cried as she asked him questions that only he could answer. That started a healing process of deep-seated wounds. She was grateful and confused at the same time. She was grateful because she was undeniably in contact with her late husband. She was confused because, being Jewish, she followed a tradition that didn't believe in the afterlife. She observed for the first time. She observed for the rest of the night as other people's spirit guides and those who had crossed over came through and communicated with them. The next morning, only one day after she arrived, she took the shuttle van to the airport and flew back home. She wasn't mad at me. She was torn between her beliefs and her experience. Tip: it's a powerful experience when you make your first contact with your guides. They are straightforward and see things that you don't. They also see what's coming. They speak to you in an organized way as they elevate you to higher understandings. For some, this will be such a powerful experience. It will literally make them feel dizzy, like vertigo. This is what a shift in consciousness can feel like. For others, it will put them to sleep. Many won't even realize it happened or will forget it as soon as it does. Just like that experience when I took the photograph of my spirit guides with everyone in the room and no one even noticed it. And here it is on film. Your job is to release all resistance and open up to this expanded awareness so you can benefit from it in the here and now. Training people on the correct use of the talking board was my number one focus. Unfortunately, most of the people I trained attempted to dominate their channeling partner, and even me. Most turned out to be power hungry, taking credit for the channeled information that actually came from a higher intelligence, not from them. Their egos took over. The moment they did that, the channeled information became corrupted. It started coming from their own biases, thoughts, and beliefs, instead of coming from clarity and cleanly from the source. They misused their potential to channel greater wisdom for self-satisfying reasons. Their need to be right was their biggest downfall because it closed down all access to their guides. Pure channels or mediums get egos out of the way to access the highest quality information from beyond this earth plane to pass that through into this dimension. When performed this way for a client, it allows answers relevant to the client to be transmitted directly from their guides. It's always accurate. I would bring this to their attention, but they would fiercely defend themselves. This was completely unacceptable. From my experience over the years, this is the only problem in using this or any modality to access information from your guides. The charlatans you hear about all the time are people who twist the information because they are coming from their egos. They have their own agenda, and that's where it goes wrong every time. I kept coming across people who were seduced by their egos as they claimed to be in contact with their guides. It happened over and over again. Channeling partner after channeling partner, it continued to happen as these people with advanced training would contaminate the information. I would cut them loose and move on to others on the waiting list. Just like my mother had demonstrated to me, I was witnessing what power looked like in the wrong hands, and there were a lot of wrong hands. In the summer of 1990, I did a psychic fair with the young girl I had trained. Alicia was in her early 20s. She was one of the few who did not indulge in self-serving tactics. It was refreshing working with her because she was truly interested in learning what those wise beings had to relay to the people we did the channeled readings for. Until I encountered her, I didn't know if this cooperative quality could be found in another. I was pleased to see that it could. We arrived in Southern California the night before the event. Alicia and I stayed with my mother-in-law at the home she had rented for the summer. I really liked my mother-in-law, and she was delighted to have us with her, since she had come to peace with her experience at the Sedona channeling event. That night, when I went to bed, I closed the door and the heavy wood plantation blinds, making the room pitch black. I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden, a blue light permeated the room. I looked at the blinds thinking it must be coming from there, but they were sealed shut. The light was not coming through the cracks of any windows or doors in the room either. It was in the room. I tried to keep my eyes open and experience this for as long as I could, but I couldn't stay awake. I woke up in the morning with someone pulling on my legs. They were telling me it was time to get up and get to the event. I guess whoever the visitors were from the night before knew I would need help waking up after doing some sort of energy work on me that night. At breakfast, Steve's mom and Alicia said nothing about what I had experienced. So I asked them if they had seen a blue light the night before, and they both said no. I asked my mother-in-law if she had ever seen a blue light in the house, and she said no. So I let it go. I felt especially good once I was awake, and I knew it had everything to do with that blue light experience. I knew they were up to something. Awareness. When you work with your guides to be of service to others, they help you in every way possible. This would turn out to be just the start of more to come. When we got to the venue, Alicia and I started doing channeled readings for people. Though it started out like usual, all of a sudden, my voice turned into what sounded like a computer synthesized voice. The messages I was speaking out loud were emotionless and very mechanical. I couldn't stop it, and I couldn't help it. For me, this was obvious, and I was sure everyone else could hear it. The client didn't seem to hear it, and Alicia was only hearing it intermittently. Whatever was happening, it was only happening to me and not anyone else. That's all I knew and all I was allowed to know at that point. Tip. As you learn to discover these unseen forces, you won't always understand the when and why of what they do. By the fact that you recognize that something is indeed happening and that you are ready to receive these adjustments. Expect more interesting encounters going forward. There's nothing to fear. Alicia was due back to uh, get back to college in the fall. It had been great working with her, and because of her, I finally experienced someone whose traits made a good channeling partner. Unfortunately, people who possess those traits are rare. When Alicia left, another person from the training class approached me and wanted to work with me. His name was Mike. He was older and married, so I was okay with trying him out. We started doing events and things were going along fine. In the summer of 1990, I stayed overnight in a Phoenix hotel after one of my events. That evening, I went swimming, and after I got out of the pool, I was telepathically guided to lie on the grass on my back. This was similar to the UFO encounter I had in 1972. I did so and instantly started vibrating all over. It progressed into a gentle bouncing of my body off the ground. It was like electricity. Then they started communicating with me telepathically. I telepathically communicated back, asking them where they were. They said they were on a platform and they were there to raise my energy. They asked me to let them know if it became too much and they would stop. I told them it was okay, and they continued delivering their electric charge all through me as my body vibrated and my teeth started to chatter uncontrollably. While this was all going on, I was transported into a dark, secluded cave where there was a large body of water. I was wearing an electric dress from head to toe. It was shiny, alive. It was a shiny, alive, form-fitting white formal garment. I was lying on my back with my feet in the water and my head in the lap of a Native American man. The electricity was pulsing throughout my body in this sacred place with this Native American guide looking over me. Excuse me. I don't know how long this went on, but it just stopped when the work was finished. After the experience, I was physically wiped out. I couldn't talk or walk, so I crawled across the lawn until I stopped vibrating. Once the vibrating and the teeth chattering stopped, I stood up and slowly walked back to my room. I was really tired as I fell across the bed. The next thing I knew, it was morning. Apparently, I had been ready for an amping up, and I sure got it. Tip: from this, you can see what's possible when you're not afraid, so a greater potential can emerge. When you have a strong, long-term connection to your guides, you are protected. So the key is to not question it, because that will stop it cold every time. The effect of this event changed me forever in a powerful and positive way. The next day, I drove back to Sedona, and the minute I walked through the door, Steve took one look at me and started crying. That wasn't like him. And he said, "I'm losing you." There's consequences to this stuff, you guys, in this world, okay? As you move through it, you'll see things that make you sad, okay? He could feel this energy shift in me. I didn't know what he meant. I hadn't told him what happened because I knew it would have scared him. Oh, God. In fact, I never told anyone. How could I? Why would I? For me, it was just an ongoing process. My next event was the Tucson Psychic Fair. To my surprise, the Tucson news station showed up unexpectedly with their cameras, lights, and news reporter and microphones. When they entered the room, they came directly to my booth. We were in the middle of a channeling session projected on the overhead screen. The image that bounced off the back wall had created a lot of interest and, like always, drew a crowd. The reporter walked up to me, stuck a microphone in my face, and started asking me questions. As this happened, my channeling partner, Mike, came over and literally pushed me out of the way. He positioned himself in front of the cameras, waiting to be interviewed. The reporter asked him to stand aside as they wanted to interview me. Mike reluctantly moved, and the reporters shot a lot of footage and did a short interview with me. It was aired that night on the 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock news. It was great publicity and nice to see that people liked what we did. Unfortunately, I didn't know what to make of Mike anymore. After this sweet and sour moment at the Tucson event, I stopped doing all events and training. Mike said I wouldn't dare stop doing this with all this media momentum working for me. I looked him in the eye and told him, "You sure don't know me." I also told him I couldn't work with him after what he had done. I discovered Mike belonged to a spiritualist church where they did amateur channeling contests. I called it karaoke channeling. The attendees at the church would recite channeled messages in strange voices as their bodies went into gyrations. They couldn't remember what they said, which is also known as trance channeling, so it provided no value to them personally. So what was the point? This was like show and tell and a B-rated performance at best. These people had a poverty consciousness, and they actually took pride in it. They followed the false belief that poor is pure. I saw that they were just using spirituality as an excuse for their poverty-filled lives. They were also competitive about who was the best channeler, missing the point as they pandered to each other week after week. That was sure not for me. I was glad to say goodbye to Mike. After my disappointment with Mike and so many people like him, I took my project back to the drawing board and retested it based on what I had learned. For the first time, I realized that this new project had a life of its own, and its timing was not up to me. I never owned a project like this before. I saw it was going to take a while to develop as it moved to the next phase. This was what made it a part-time, this is when I made it a part-time endeavor and got back into real estate during the day. I started training and working with people in the evenings. It was never hard to find candidates because almost everyone I spoke with about this was fascinated and felt privileged to be invited in. The winter of 1990, I started designing a big house for a Phoenix real estate broker who was planning on relocating to Sedona. I needed a layout table to start the job, so Steve built one for me, and I painted it when Steve was away for the night. The paint I used was an oil-based paint, so fumes were toxic. By the time I was done painting it, I was very tired, so I went to bed. I knew I should have opened the windows, to vent the fumes, but it was so cold outside, I hadn't. In my deep sleep, I was dreaming about crawling down the hallway to the big sliding glass door in the living room and throwing it open. In this dream, my guides were once again telling me what to do step by step. I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep, so I found the dream annoying rather than instructional. Next, I was awakened by a visitation from them as they blasted a bright light at me through the window on the top high part of the bedroom wall. It was as if it was a helicopter outside the window, but without any sound. The light was about 15 feet outside the window. Since the house was surrounded by pine trees, I knew it couldn't be a helicopter. The bright light was really bothering me because I was so tired and it kept waking me up. Just like the dream, they actually made me act on what the dream had told me to do earlier. And that is crawl down the hallway, get to the sliding glass door, and open it up. They told me to crawl because they knew I was so intoxicated by the fumes that I couldn't walk. Finally, I relented. It took everything I had to physically do this. After throwing the door open, I crawled back to the bedroom as fast as I could and passed out. The next morning, when I woke up, it was freezing in the house. I walked out to the open living room, sliding glass door and closed it. That's when I remembered the dream and also the visitation and realized that if I hadn't gotten the fumes out of the house, I never would have woken up. I realized that they came to my rescue once again. I also realized in doing that, they wanted me here for some reason. Apparently, I wasn't done. Awareness. It is times like these that you have to ask yourself if you were attempting to devise a way out of here. After all, with all my background in construction, I knew better than anyone to vent the house after painting that table. Again, unconsciously, I was looking for an escape hatch. When you catch yourself doing something like this, you know that something is wrong in your life. You know you need to make some changes, and they are probably overdue. In my case, my guides had warned me just 1 year before to get out of my marriage. Little did I know at that time how important their message would turn out to be and how Steve was going to change when we moved to Arizona. But my guides knew. One Sunday morning, a few months after the incident with the paint fumes, Steve and I were sleeping when a high-pitched sonar-like sound traveled over our heads about 2 feet above our heads. It was like the sound of a whale in the ocean. From all the years of my life coach training with my spirit guides, I knew just to lie there, not question it, and just let it tell me what it intended for me to know. Steve didn't have my experience, so he jumped up and demanded that I tell him what was going on. I tried to stay with it, but he was too loud and interrupted the magic of that moment. I told him he interrupted it, so I couldn't tell him anything. Once again, he was really scared. I couldn't believe how he was reacting. And again, I saw this as the merry-go-round dream showing me how fear would dominate people so that many of them couldn't be reached. Okay, you guys. So Next Saturday, we're going to have our webinar. So I won't be here at 1 o'clock on Saturday. I'm here every Saturday except for the last Saturdays of the month, because that's when we do our webinar. And just so you know what it is, it's the light beings. Nothing is as it appears to be. Everything will change over the coming months. You don't want to miss it. So go to lindadeir.com and click on live events, and you'll see it right there. Okay. And there's a video trailer for you to watch. And you can sign up there. 2 Saturdays from now, on October 3rd at 1 p.m. Pacific time, I will read to you from chapter 21 of Guided. My advisors mastermind my next moves. Having put the channeling project on hold, I took my next step in real estate. As a home builder, an architectural designer, and a subcontractor, I was completing the circle by getting my real estate license. Once I had my license, I began to research the area to become market savvy before considering myself ready to work with a client. So until then, remember, you have help. You are never alone. And always